Today's topic is evaluation of evidence for preservation of mandible in oral cancers. Myself, Dr. Satya Vijay, MCH first year resident, IMS BHU, and my moderator is Dr. Manoj Pandey sir, head of the department, IMS BHU. While making this slide preparation, I had few questions in my mind, and based on which I have started looking for these articles. These questions came into my mind, what is the basis for mandibular conservation, and what does a meta-analysis result says, and what is the quality of life implications after different types of resections, and does dental extraction affect the type of resection, and does an induction selection approach in organ preservation in oral cancers is it applicable as in laryngeal cancers, and does a primary chemotherapy approach can decrease the extents to excisions, and what is a mandibular conservation approach for tumors in if it is in remote regions like RMT or lower gingiva. My first study which I have taken was a review called a mandibular conservation in oral cancer, done in both IMS BHU and in it was done in IMS BHU. And this study has taken the following subheadings like materials, methods, like mechanism of mandibular invasion, prediction of mandibular invasion, clinical evaluation, radiological evaluation, and intraoperative evaluation of mandible, histological examination, segmental versus marginal mandibulectomy, and prognosis in cases where there is mandibular invasion. In this study, it has taken a total 101 articles, out of which 6 were clinical trials, 62 were retrospective studies, 19 were prospective, and 4 were case reports. I have not gone detail into every of these reports, but few which I found interesting, I have elaborated them in the following slides. Initially, it was an old assumption that oral squamous cell carcinoma spread via lymphatics in the mandibular periosteum. And this was the assumption which made that the mainstay of treatment was composite resection of cancer with en bloc resection of segment or hemimandible. But in 1971, Marchetta first challenged this concept of periosteal lymphatics for mandibular invasion and first attempted the use of mandibular conservative procedures. And one among these studies which I wanted to elaborate is the patterns of invasion and routes of tumor entry into the mandible by oral squamous cell carcinoma, done by Brown et al. And this was a prospective study which studied the histological patterns of tumor invasion and routes of tumor entry into the mandible performed in a series of 100 previously untreated patients. The main strength of this study was it was a prospective study and the size of the sample. And the previous reports which have shown the patterns of invasion were small in number, and they were also done in patients where they are irradiated previously. The results of this study showed that with an increasing size of primary tumor and depth of invasion in the soft tissues, there is a chance of invasive pattern of bone involvement. There are two types of bone involvement. One is invasive, one is erosive, which I will deal in subsequent slides. Invasive being the most aggressive pattern. And there is also statistical significance between increasing pathological node status, that is N1 and 2, and the presence of extracapsular spread, which was associated with the presence of invasive pattern in the bone. But there is no significant correlation between a soft tissue invasion and the perineural spread with the pattern of soft tissue invasion. The deeper invasion of squamous cell carcinoma of mandible is closely associated with the invasive pattern in a significant manner. Also, the invasive pattern of disease is strongly correlated with the subperiosteal new bone formation significantly. And the other pattern, which is erosive, it is associated significantly with increased osteoclastic activity. And there is also convincing evidence from this study that the tumors enter the mandible at the point of abutment rather than the preferential entry like either occlusal surface or neural foramina or periodontal membrane. And the common point of tumor abutment is the junction of attached and deflected mucosa, both in dentate and edentate mandible. And there is also tendency in this study to show that deeply invading tumors in the soft tissue may invade the tumor directly. It is not statistically significant, but it showed a tendency. And also, the direct entry into the mandible was significantly seen in tumors where the primary is in tongue, floor of mouth, and buccal mucosa, compared to alveolus and RMT. Coming to the conclusions of this study were, the large and more deeply invading tumors in soft tissue are more likely to invade the mandible and show invasive spread, reducing the options of rim resection. And the tumor tend to enter the mandible at a point of abutment, both in dentate and edentate jaw, and often it is a junction of reflected and attached mucosa. So this plays an important in planning a rim resection for tumors sited in tongue and floor of mouth because the entry is direct more often. This is a diagram showing that the point of entry can be below the occlusal ridge or gingival crest, necessitating a more of lingual side of mandible to be included in the planned rim resection. Coming to the clinical evaluation, this study showed that bimanual assessment is most commonly done. And the common signs of mandibular invasion on clinical evaluation are cortical thickening, symptoms of inferior alveolar paresthesias, bone irregularities, and pathological factors. According to these reports, the sensitivity ranged between 32 to 96% in this review. Coming to the radiological evaluation, literature review showed there is no single investigation that can predict that tumor has invaded mandible in 100% reliability. But Gu et al. In 2010 has reported that there is improved sensitivity when there is a combined analysis of either CT, MRI, PET-CT than they are done independently. Below is a table showing the various sensitivity and specificities of OPG, CT, MRI, and scintigraphy in various studies. Coming to the intraoperative evaluation of mandibular invasion, Brown et al. In 1994 has shown that periosteal stripping at the time of resection represented an accurate predictor of presence of mandibular invasion, but there is just one false prediction in 35 cases analyzed. Coming to Panda et al. In 2009, the significant predictors of bone invasion on periosteal stripping are the subperiosteal reaction, cortical expansion, and the presence of pathological fracture. Forrest et al. In 1995 has advocated the use of frozen section analysis of cancellous bone to confirm the adequacy of bone margins. Oxford in 2006 has shown that frozen section analysis of bone margins are a reliable method to evaluate margins intraoperatively. Weilash et al. In 2010 has shown that intraoperative frozen section using a turpine drilled bone specimens have shown that a consistency between a frozen and specificity of 79 and 98% respectively. As I've told previously, the histopathological examination, there are two types of pattern of invasion. One is an invasive pattern and another is an erosive pattern. And in invasive pattern, as you can see in the below diagram, there are fingers or islands of tumor advancing deeply into the bone, and there is no obvious osteoclastic activity. Coming to the erosive pattern, broad advancing front with osteoclastic activity is seen in erosive pattern, which is significantly seen. And there is also, you can see a connective tissue between the tumor and the bone. Coming to Wong et al. In 2000 has shown that there is a worse prognosis with infiltrative pattern. And infiltrative pattern has exhibited an aggressive behavior, that is, an increased likelihood of positive margins, recurrence, death with the disease, and shorter disease-free survival. A 3-year disease-free survival is 30% for infiltrative pattern, whereas it is 73% in erosive pattern. Coming to Hong et al. In 2001, they have studied a radiological and histological defect comparing in 21 patients with gingival squamous cell carcinoma in molar region. There is always an underestimation of tumor invasion width of about 9.2 mm and a depth of about 3.4 mm. And these findings were more reflected in infiltrative pattern, giving a cautious bone resection when radiologically it is suggestive of infiltrative pattern. Coming to whether a segmental to be performed, a mandibular or preservation has to be performed, the following are the studies. Totsuka et al. In 1991, it has shown that mandibular gingival carcinoma almost has same survival at 2-year follow-up after marginal and segmental techniques. Coming to Gura et al. In 2003, has shown an equal local regional recurrence rate and survival rate in 106 patients with oral squamous cell carcinoma, either treated by segmental or marginal mandibulectomy. It also showed that no evidence of disease at 2 years was almost same in both segmental and marginal, which is 56 and 61% respectively. Coming to Barrett-Brott et al. In 1993, they have compared two types of conservative resection. One is rim and other is lingual sagittal mandibulectomy in a fresh cadaver human mandibles in terms of strength. And using strain gauge techniques, it has shown that rim mandibulectomy was more resistant to fracturing than the lingual sagittal mandibulectomy. And a maintenance of 1 centimeter thick segment of bone inferiorly is required to reduce the risk of fracture formation. Smooth curved osteotomies without step-offs resulted in a technique which is superior, biochemically sound. This diagram shows that angled osteotomies or step-offs acts as a point of stress concentration, whether in other way, smooth curved osteotomies are biochemically superior. Coming to the tumors about RMT and adjacent tonsillar fossa, Historically, they were treated with posterior segmental mandibulectomy, but and there is also a high incidence of mandibular invasion in RMT, which is almost 75%. Pinsoli et al. In 1997 has shown that posterior marginal mandibulectomy is done in 14 patients in which there is no preoperative radiological evidence of bone erosion. This study has shown no complications and it has been associated with good maintenance of cosmesis. Coming to Petruzzi et al. In 2003, a local control rate of 93.75% with posterior marginal mandibulectomy for tumors of posterior oral cavity has been shown. This is a study Brown et al. This study has emphasized that need to consider the extent of bone resorption after the loss of teeth in clinical management of mandible invaded by squamous cell carcinoma. This study has also given a guide to surgical team to make a decision process and also to increase the accuracy of mandibular resection to maximize the chance of cure without increasing the morbidity. It has used a Cawood-Howell classification, which I have mentioned below, in which it shows 1 and 2 is like it's a dentate mandible or there is an immediate post extraction. 3 and 4 are either round or knife edge ridge. 5 and 6 are flat or depressed. Whether in a round or knife edge ridges or flat or depressed ridges, that is 3 to 4, when there is a radiological evidence of mandibular invasion, a segmental resection is always preferred according to this study. Coming to prognosis in cases with mandibular invasion, Ogura et al. In 2002 has shown that bone invasion identified on CT is a significant prognostic factor in cervical metastasis. Tankir et al. In 2002 and Gura et al. In 2003 has shown that there is no statistical relationship between a presence of histological bone invasion and risk of local recurrence. Only a bone resection of greater than 4 centimeters and tumor invasion of surgical margins were associated with significantly associated with increased local recurrence. O'Brien et al. In 2003, it's a series of 94 patients who underwent marginal and 33 underwent segmental. Patient with bone invasion, the local control rate was higher with segmental, but this was not statistically significant. The survival was significantly influenced only by positive soft tissue margin, but not by bone invasion. This is another study done in IMSBHU and also in Thiruvananthapuram. Regarding the tumor stage and dissection margins, not the mandibular invasion determines the survival of patients with cancers of oromandibular region. It has evaluated various factors, including the bone marrow bone involvement on survival of patients with oromandibular cancers. It's a prospective study with 51 patients undergoing mandibular excision. 5 years later, a survival analysis was carried out, and the predictors of survival was estimated using Cox proportional hazard model. The results showed that there is 3-year survival of 62.6%, 5-year survival of 46.9%. The factors that predict significantly affected the survival were tumor stage, margin of surgical excision, and nodal stage. The 5-year survival with with the mandibular involvement is 33%, and without involvement was 44%, with no significance. So this study concluded that mandibular conservation may be carried out even in the presence of involved mandible with negative resection margin can be achieved. Usually RCTs cannot be designed because of ethical issues. So the conclusion of entire review showed that the segmental dissection caused severe functional and cosmetic problems due to loss of continuity of mandible, which can be achieved with microvascular transfer of vascularized bone graft. Conservative resection is safe as long as marginal mandibulectomy does not lead to compromise of soft tissue margins. And the final decision of mandibulectomy is based on clinical judgment in the operation theater. And segmental dissection should be reserved for patients with extensive bone invasion or those with limited invasion in a thin atrophic mandible. This is another study done in Memorial Sloan Kettering in United States, showing the influence of bone invasion on outcomes after marginal mandibulectomy in squamous cell carcinoma of oral cavity.
Yeah, I thought you were that you locked down.
Excuse me, I think someone's mic is on, please. Okay. The aim of this study was the incidence of to see the incidence of bone involvement and also to influence on oncological outcomes in patients who underwent marginal mandibulectomy. It's a retrospective study performed on untreated patients, and postoperative radiotherapy was given in 27%, and postoperative chemoradiotherapy was given in 8% of patients who had microscopic bone invasion. Median follow-up was of 55 months. The endpoint was local and regional free recurrence survival and disease-specific survival. The results, like there is a microscopic bone invasion in 15% of patients, cortical invasion in 32, medullary in 13, and not specified in 4. And 8 patients had microscopic positive bone margins. These positive bone margins were significantly associated with medullary bone involvement and floor of mouth and buccal mucosa as primary sites. Local and regional and disease-free survival was similar both in with or without bone invasion. Local regional free survival is similar in patients with microscopic positive and negative margins as long as there is a post-operative adjuvant treatment was administered. And this study also showed that if there is a previous dental extractions in the vicinity of tumor before surgery, it did not adversely affect the eventual outcome. So extended dissections have not been shown a particular benefit in this kinds of patients. And this was also supported by another study called Yamagata et al. In 2013. Coming to two meta-analyses which I have taken, both of which were different kinds. I'll deal them in subsequent slides. The first was seeing whether marginal or segmental mandibulectomy as a modality of selection for oral cancer is a systemic review and meta-analysis. The main aim of this meta-analysis was to see the survival rate and disease control in cases where there is histological evidence of bone invasion. And it compared the differences in survival rate and disease control between marginal mandibular and segmental mandibulectomy patients. The intervention group had marginal mandibulectomies, and the control group has either segmental or hemi, subtotal, or total mandibulectomy. The primary outcome is disease-free survival and overall survival. And secondary outcome was either 2-year or 5-year survival rate and local control. Coming to the characteristic features of this study are, it has taken into consideration 15 studies, and all of which were retrospective cohort studies, which included 1,672 patients. And the primary is located either on gingiva, floor of mouth, tongue, cheek, retromolar trigone, oropharynx, and tonsillar region. As it's a meta-analysis, there is always a risk of biases, which was calculated using Saltage et al. And if the score is less than 10, it is calculated a high risk. And the thing is, all the studies which were included in this meta-analysis has a score less than 10, showing it as high risk of bias. And the frequency of mandibular invasion was shown between 21 to 62% in these studies. Coming to disease-free survival, when all patients were considered, marginal mandibulectomy has 14% increase in 2-year disease-free survival compared to that of rate of segmental dissection group. In patients with mandibular invasion, similar 2-year disease-free survival rates is seen in two groups. But in mandibular medullary invasion patients, 2-year disease-free survival is reduced at 36% if marginal mandibulectomy was adopted. This was significant. Coming to 5-year disease-free survival, marginal mandibulectomy could increase the rate by 19% if bone invasion is not considered. But if there is a medullary invasion, there is a weak evidence indicating that marginal mandibulectomy could reduce a 5-year disease-free survival by 12% compared with segmental mandibulectomy. This is not significant. Kaplan-Meier survival data supported that effect of marginal mandibulectomy in all kinds of oral cancers with 24% increase in disease-free survival. And patients with medullary invasion, segmental mandibulectomy has given 73% better disease-free survival than marginal, which was statistically significant. Coming to overall survival, 2-year and 5-year overall survival was not significant in both the groups. Kaplan-Meier survival curve analysis showed that no statistical difference between two groups, although segmental mandibulectomy could increase the overall survival by 23%. Coming to local control, 2-year and 5-year local controls, there is no statistical significance between the two groups. But in patients with pathological mandibular invasion, weak evidence that local control can be decreased 18% for marginal resection compared to segmental dissection. In Kaplan-Meier curve data provided that there is a weak evidence in favor of segmental mandibulectomy in patients with mandibular invasion. The limitations of this meta-analysis is it's considered all retrospective cohort studies, and all studies had a high risk of bias, and baseline data were not standardized in different studies. Coming to the conclusion of this meta-analysis, it showed that if a safe margin can be obtained, type of mandibulectomy does not result in difference in local control, disease-free survival, and overall survival. Marginal mandibulectomy may be recommended if there is no or only superficial mandibular cortex invasion. A segmental mandibulectomy represents a more reasonable choice in extensive mandibular cortex invasion or a medullary invasion with morbidity on overall survival. This is a different kind of meta-analysis. It has compared two groups. One is a mandibular preservation method. According to this study, mandibular preservation is a visor incision in the neck with a mandibular lingual release and a mandibulotomy approach. This has compared the two approaches. It has evaluated surgical margins, overall survival, total and local recurrence rates, fistula formation, and other functional outcomes. And results like it included 6 studies and 309 patients. There is no significant difference in surgical margins or overall survival rate or recurrence rates or in speech and tongue management. But in mandible preservation group, there is a statistically significant lower fistula formation rate than mandibulotomy group after the operation. Coming to the next study, this was primary chemotherapy in resectable oral cavity cancers, a randomized controlled trial which enrolled resectable stage T4 to T2 to T4, N0 to N2, squamous cell carcinoma for oral cavity. It has randomized patients to assigned to 3 cycles of cisplatin, 5-fluorouracil followed by surgery and surgery alone. And both the arms, post-operative radiotherapy was reserved to only high-risk patients. The results were there was no significant difference in overall survival, and in there is 5-year survival was also same. But the post-operative radiotherapy was administered only in 33% of patients in chemotherapy arm and 46% in control arm. And a mandible resection was performed in 52% in control arm versus 31% in chemotherapy arm. So conclusion like that chemotherapy, primary chemotherapy to standard surgery was unable to improve survival, but the primary chemotherapy seemed to reduce the number of patients who need to undergo a mandibulectomy or a radiation therapy. There appears a room for using preoperative chemotherapy to spare the demolitive surgery or radiotherapy in patients with advanced resectable oral cavity cancer, but further studies are needed to approve this kind of approach. This study I've selected because the induction chemotherapy and radiotherapy has been used as an organ preservation in laryngeal cancers. Whether the same can be replicated in oral cavity was tested in this study. In this study, there are 2 groups. In the first group, 19 patients were taken by they have given an induction chemotherapy with cisplatin or carboplatin 5-fluorouracil. If they showed a response greater than 50%, they have given a concurrent chemoradiotherapy. But if the response is less than 50%, they have went to surgical excision. They have compared this with other 53% of patients who have underwent a surgical expiration and selective postoperative radiotherapy and chemotherapy. The results of this study showed that there is a significantly better overall survival, disease-specific survival, and loco-regional controls in surgical cohort. So conclusions of this, despite success for organ preservation in larynx, comparative survival analysis in oral squamous cell carcinoma finding support surgery as principal treatment in oral squamous cell carcinoma. Next, this is a study showing a site-specific cancers and marginal mandibulectomy outcomes. This study has taken into consideration patients all who are undergoing marginal mandibulectomy, who are clinical T1, T2, N0 of lower gingiva. And this study has shown that there's a pathological positive, it has shown that there's a cortical invasion in 23 patients and medullary invasion in 9 patients of total 142 patients. And 5-year loco-regional control and disease survival were 85 to 88% respectively. And patients with bone invasion has significantly higher risk of recurrence than in patients without bone invasion. And high neutrophil lymphocyte ratio had a higher risk of worse prognosis. The limitation of this study is a retrospective and small sample size. The conclusions were like oncological outcomes in patients undergoing marginal mandibulectomy with clinical T1 and T2 squamous cell carcinoma of lower gingiva were favorable, and their bone invasion was commonly seen. And if bone invasion is seen, it has significantly decreased the prognosis in patients who are undergoing marginal mandibulectomy. This is a study added in last minute, so I couldn't make a proper workout. It showed that patient who had undergone previous radiotherapy demonstrated a different pattern of bone invasion. That is, multiple points along the cortex of mandible can be invaded. So generally, marginal mandibulectomy is contraindicated in an irradiated mandible. I have selected this study to see what is the quality of life after various resections. This study has shown the aim of this study was used to use a validated head and neck health related questionnaire to compare the rim and segmental mandibular resection in patients having primary surgery for oral cancer. University of Washington Quality Life Questionnaire was administered before treatment, at 6 months, at 12 months, and after 8 months. The results of this study were like preoperatively, segmental resection group reported significantly more pain and chewing problems and lower composite score. Postoperatively also, segmental group was scoring bad, but the significant difference between rim and segmental resection was seen when the resections were less than 4 centimeters without adjuvant radiotherapy. There is non-significant difference between rim and segmental if tumors are less than 4 centimeters with radiotherapy and in tumors greater than 4 centimeters. This various curves, like you can see the curve B showing a difference between rim and segmental when the size of tumor is less than 4 centimeters and no radiotherapy. C and D are showing where there is like non-significant difference between rim and segmental when the tumor size is less than 4 centimeters but radiotherapy has been added, and D like where the tumor size is greater than 4 centimeters. The conclusion like that the study has supported an acceptable quality of life in patients having segmental mandibulectomy reconstructed by means of composite free tissue transfer. But there is a notable differences between the scores between segmental and rim groups, and this strengthens that conservative management should be done whenever it is feasible. These are my following references. Thank you.
If we have any questions. Okay, there are two questions on chat. Saurabh Tiwari is asking, should inferior alveolar nerve be included in resection margin or not? There is no recommendation to include the inferior alveolar nerve because Vijay has not presented the data on inferior alveolar nerve spread through the inferior alveolar nerve. This occurs in less than 5% of the patient. It is not something which is very high spread, and intraneural and perineural two kind of spreads has been seen. So so far nobody recommends inclusion of inferior alveolar nerve in the resection margin. There is no evidence that it improves the survival. Anshika is asking, is trismus a problem after marginal mandibulectomy? Anshika, the trismus depends. After marginal mandibulectomy, trismus can occur, but trismus occurs mostly in cases where the closure is tight. That means no flaps are used. If marginal mandibulectomy is used with flap, usually you don't get trismus. Trismus has a different pathology and has nothing to do with doing a marginal mandibular resection or a segmental resection. It can occur even after segmental resection. Yes, Bhavna.
Sir, inferior nerve should not be included into the resection, but while doing a marginal mandibulectomy, especially in the posterior and medial part, when you do marginal mandibulectomy, it is a very high chance the inferior nerve or artery get injured. Otherwise, one should not include it into the resection.
True, true. In fact, in a marginal mandibulectomy, they say that you are normally supposed to be staying above the alveolar canal. Because if you go below the alveolar canal for doing a marginal mandibulectomy, your height of the segment left behind may not be high, and the chances of fractures are there.
Correct. And this is not for the malignancy. Even for the benign cases also, there is a risk for having an inferior alveolar nerve injury because of the higher position of canal posteriorly and medially. So there were papers in the non-malignant condition also to preserve the, like the inferior alveolar nerve preserving marginal mandibulectomy also.
Yes.
So there's the injury happens everywhere.
Yes, if the artery or the nerve is injured, then there is no point in preserving it. Akash Singh is saying if nerve found involved, does hemimandibulectomy is warranted? No. It's not. It is not an indication for hemimandibulectomy. Vertical ramus involvement is the indication of hemimandibulectomy. Does periosteal stripping provides 2 centimeter margin on oral SCC as in Kawaguchi concept in sarcoma? Avinash, you don't require a 2 centimeter margin in head and neck cancers. You require a negative bone margin, and that has been shown in all these studies. It is recommended that if you are conserving the mandible, you take a biopsy and send it for a frozen section and wait for the frozen section report before you complete your surgery. So if your resection margin is negative, you should be happy. 2 centimeter margin is not at all required. It is not required in sarcomas also. It's a negative margin. We are moving away from 2 centimeters and 5 centimeters margins now. Saurabh is asking which is the single best investigation in a patient with clinically involved mandible, CT or MRI. CT is the best to see the cortical invasion, and MRI is best to see the marrow invasion. So if you look at the studies, the CT shows the best sensitivity and specificity till date. The last comparative study was published 2 years back. It's again a Chinese study, and that also shows CT scan to be much superior than MRI when it comes to picking up the involvement of bone and mandibular involvement. MRI scores above if there is a marrow involvement, but then direct involvement of the marrow without involvement of cortex is rare, because the type of spread which has been seen most of the time is infiltrative spread. And unless there is a cortical breach, there will not be a marrow involvement. So it is assumed that the marrow involvement doesn't occur without involvement of cortex in head and neck cancers. It is actually marrow involvement is more common when there is a vascular spread from other organs, like prostate. When it metastasizes to bone, including the mandibular bone, there is a marrow involvement, multiple myelomas. And that is why the CT scan is supposed to be better. But if you want to see the earliest, pick up the earliest bone involvement, the PET could be a better modality. But unfortunate part is that it is a poor modality to guide your surgical resection. And CT scan can be used as a guide for your surgical resection. You can do a 3D reconstruction and plan your surgical cuts, which is not usually possible on PET.
Hello.
Yeah, Bhavna.
You're absolutely right, sir. In a grossly involved bone, MRI actually overestimate the bone invasion, and it has got a lot of other issues like artifact and motion and other technical issues also. So CT is always the best option.
Yes, it has a high sensitivity but low specificity. So it picks up a lot of other problems which normally are not related to the tumor invasion. So if you ask me what is the single best investigation, it is CT scan.
Hello.
Yeah, Manisha.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Good evening to everyone. I had been listening to the presenter with a lot of interest. See, I have a very basic question. The indications of a marginal mandibulectomy are entirely different from the indications of a segmental mandibulectomy. These are two different categories of patients who are operated. So why are we comparing apples and oranges?
Why do you say they are two different people?
See, if you have on pre-op imaging and clinical examination, you have a gross involvement of mandible, you are never going to offer a marginal mandibulectomy.
You have actually, Vijay should have presented the data that 80% of the mandible which are resected are actually not involved by the tumor.
Yeah, that's fine. But
so majority of the resection, majority of the mandible is being sacrificed even when it is not close to tumor.
So that reflects more on the deficiency of clinical judgment rather than the pathologist.
Yes, because the clinical judgment is usually poor, and most of the people are just sacrificing the segments. So if you look at the clinical radiological diagnosis, it will be T4A, and when you get the final pathology after segmentectomy, it will be T2. So
exactly.
So it is basically over diagnosis and over excisions.
No,
I
if
wish he
we
would have presented the data where non-involved mandibles are excised.
yes, because when you are staging the disease, your deficiency starts from the point when you stage the disease.
Yes.
So if you read through the NCCN, the AJCC staging, which is also in the NCCN, there is a very small, tiny writing in the last part of the page, which would say that superficial erosion of the mandible will not be considered as a higher stage of the disease, like
Yes.
T4.
Yes.
It would still be considered as a T1. So
Yes.
you're not going to offer a segmental mandibulectomy to a patient who has got a T1 disease.
Yes.
That's a deficiency in your surgery.
No, that is the cortical bone erosion is T4.
Yeah,
Cortical bone
exactly.
Alveolar
So
bone
if you
erosion
have
is the cancellous bone. Alveolar bone is cancellous bone, so that doesn't form a T4 lesion. So it's a bony cortex, no matter how small it is. If the cortex is involved, it makes it T4.
you would for a segmental mandibulectomy anyway, there is no point of doing a margin. So you can't compare that group of
Why won't you
patients.
do a margin? If you can get a 1 centimeter of the vertical height of inferior ramus, why wouldn't you margin? Even if there is a cortical involvement. That is what the data is showing now. The data is showing that if you can do a marginal, do a marginal. So it even an involved mandible. What
Hello,
basically
am I audible?
yeah. What basically precluding a marginal is that where you are not able to save the enough height of the mandible.
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm coming to.
Fracture.
That is what I'm coming to next. So
Yeah.
you decide, even on the basis of the imaging and your clinical judgment, that the patient has got a invasion, cortical invasion of the bone,
Yes.
and you would offer that particular patient a marginal mandibulectomy if you can preserve 1 centimeter of the rim.
Yes.
Do you recommend that? So what is the evidence for that?
There is a lot of evidence. There are
All
no
the
randomized
papers
control
that
trials.
no,
There are no
all the
randomized
papers that
control trials because it cannot be done for ethical reasons. Randomized control trials cannot be done. But there are enough number of retrospective cohort data which shows that marginal should be done wherever possible.
No, again, it comes to the same thing. Whether you recommend a marginal mandibulectomy on the amount of bone you will be able to save, depending on that, or you would recommend it depending on the imaging findings of a bone invasion, deep bone invasion.
No, it is basically recommended. Deep bone invasion does not preclude marginal mandibulectomy. So recommendation is you should be able to get a negative margin and still save at least 1 centimeter height of the bone to prevent fractures.
How do you intra-op or maybe post-op define a negative margin of a mandible which is having deep bone involvement on the CT scan?
Basically, one of the techniques is intraoperative periosteal stripping. You can strip the
Periosteum would not be deep bone invasion. Deep bone invasion is only when you know it only if you have a frozen section.
Manisha,
and you send the
deep bone invasion doesn't occur without cortical breach. And cortical breach you are able to see when you do a periosteal stripping.
Yeah. So I would like you people to, I was expecting the student to tell us about this retrospective study also, which was by the Tata Memorial Group published last year in 2019. The title was The Incidence, Predictors and Impact of Positive Margins on T4 tumors of the T4 lesions.
Positive margin, we all know have poor prognosis. We all know that positive margins have poor prognosis. Because if you leave behind a positive bony margin, you cannot go back and revise your margin.
You cannot, because this was a retrospective study and they they analyzed the specimens which were already resected. It was a retrospective study. So what they say, 67.5% of people who had a negative margin on histopathology were having a recurrence-free and a 3-year overall survival, which was statistically significantly better. Now, what was the adequate margin? You cannot find it out intra-op. Even if you have a frozen section, you will not be able to find it out.
Why?
So it will always be a retrospective study. Whatever study you do would probably be a retrospective one. Unless you have got a recommendation that on a clinical trial basis, maybe that we will take this amount of margin. Whether it comes positive or not, we do not know it now.
See, you cannot afford to have a positive margin even in a clinical trial, Manisha. That is what I'm trying to tell you.
Exactly. It will be ethically wrong to have a
So
positive
that is what
margin.
I'm saying, that you cannot preoperatively decide that I'm going to do it. That is why I said the best way, if you see our 2012 systematic review, you will see that the best way is have a three-dimensional mandibular reconstruction being done after CT scan and plan your mandibular resection on the reconstruction. So if you think that after making the cuts, you are able to get a 1 centimeter height, it's fine. If you don't get a 1 centimeter height, don't attempt a marginal mandibulectomy. But for a smaller invasion where you can still get a 1 centimeter height, don't sacrifice the segment also.
So what these people recommend, out of 400 patients whom they did a retrospective analysis, they recommend a bony margin of somewhere around 1.5 centimeters on either side. Wherever they see on the CT scan, you do a 3D reconstruction, define the area which is eroded, take 1.5 centimeters on either side of that area.
Why
do a segmental
1.5
mandibulectomy
centimeter?
and
What is the rationale of 1.5 centimeter?
that is from their retrospective
So how do they know?
analysis.
How do they know that 1.5 centimeter margin is adequate and 0.55 mm margin is not adequate?
Exactly.
They have never
Because
showed a result that 5 mm negative margin and 1.5 mm negative cm negative margin is different. You see, they
yes,
have to show a
that
comparison that
would
if there is a
require.
5 mm margin, this happens. If there is a 1 centimeter margin, this happens.
Yes, that is why
So
it has
making a
not become
recommendation
a.
without presenting a data, is not actually justified. It is
No, the
actually not
problem is
justified.
it is not a practice changing recommendation. The thing is, you will have to have sort of a clinical trial where you would have a 5 millimeter, 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeter, 2 centimeter adequate numbers in all the arms, and then find out which one is better. That is how you would calculate a margin, which is never possible.
I'll tell you, a negative margin is going to be good enough, because all these patients where the bone is involved is T4A, and they will receive adjuvant radiotherapy,
Yes.
adjuvant concurrent chemo rather. So even a negative margin will be good. Why do you need a 1.5 centimeter margin? That's my question. You don't need 1.5 centimeter even on soft tissue. Actually, the study that we had done in RCC, Trivandrum, has actually shown that actually bone margin, even if it is positive, it does not affect the survival. It is the soft tissue margin which actually leads to recurrences rather than the bony margins.
Most of the T4 diseases in head and neck, oral squamous cell carcinomas, the main controversy is not on the overall survival. It is on the disease-free survival.
Yes.
It is on the number of patients whom you would end up having a local recurrence rather than patients who die of their disease.
Yes.
So overall survival as a endpoint of any study would probably not be a very great study, because it will always be the same. You see, most of your studies which the student quoted had the overall survival which was similar whether you do a marginal mandibulectomy or a segmental mandibulectomy, give pre-op chemotherapy, give post-op RT,
no, we don't
do all kinds of stuff.
We don't have any study where we have given pre-operative chemotherapy. And that is one of the question Avinash has asked, in which patient would you like to consider NSCT in oral SCC? We don't give NSCT in oral SCC. It is not a policy with us. It is not a policy with us.
Yes, it's not even a policy with us, unless there are some reasons where, like patient doesn't really want surgery at that point of time.
Yes, because most of the studies have shown there is no effect of NSCT. Even there is no downstaging of the tumors also.
Actually, 2 years back, we had sort of a, not exactly randomized, but we had large groups of patients into two arms. One who received a borderline resectable tumor, who received neoadjuvant, and the one who underwent primary surgery. There was no difference in overall survival. However, there was a little bias towards, because we have got different levels of expertise in operating. What may be operable for me might not be operable for somebody else.
Yes.
And those patients, those bias are difficult to eradicate in these kind of studies. It was done from the radiation department. But again, you are right, because there was no difference in overall survival. There was a little more difference in the resectability, which is a very doubtful issue in anyway.
Yes.
Because if you have 4 surgeons operating with different degrees of expertise, it is very difficult to say what is actually resectable initially and what became resectable after the anesthesia.
Yes, resectability is very much surgeon dependent, but now it is very much guideline dependent as well. Saurabh is asking, is there a role of OPG to assess mandibular involvement? Manisha, do you do OPG in all patients?
Yes, I do a OPG in all patients. Most
Yeah.
of the patient, at least the ones I do. What happens is I do a OPG for 2 reasons. I mostly have a CT scan. There is a small group of patients who cannot afford to get a CT scan, where I have to do my decision making on the basis of a OPG. I'm not talking of those people. But people who already have a CT scan, I would again do a OPG to tell me some other important factors. One is I would like to see the canal. That is one thing I generally see. If there is an invasion, deep invasion into the canal is disrupted. The outline of the canal is disrupted. I would not see the CT scan report. I would decide that this patient needs a segmental mandibulectomy. I would not offer a margin.
We are not doing OPG anymore, because the problem of OPG is that there has to be at least 30% bone resorptions before OPG can show any changes in the mandible. So
the negative OPG
if the OPG, negative OPG does not rule out a mandibular invasion.
Anything. But a positive OPG will give you some information.
Yes. So that is why there is no point in doing an OPG. And
that's why I do it.
It's
have, cheap. It is accessible.
So if you have a lesion which is abetting the mandible, it is better to have a CT scan straight away rather than going for an OPG.
Yeah. Same here, sir. We are also not doing a OPG since so many years, and we started just when CT is available, we don't do OPG.
Yes, Kush is asking.
Manoj, can I comment?
Yeah, sure, Chandra.
Manoj, I so eagerly came to today's meeting because the topic is mandibular preservation, and even though I don't manage head and neck, I sit in DNB examinations, and I understood that 30% of the failures happening are when the candidate is unable to tell how to manage mandible.
Yes.
Because invariably you will have 1 or 2 head and neck cases, and the mandible management is one of the important aspects of surgical examination and surgical practice as well.
Yes.
And we had a lot of discussions, and I don't know, Bhavana is there. Bhavana passed DNB. I don't know where she is coming. And Manisha is a faculty. And if you try to dilute the discussion to consultant level, the 100 of PGs who are sitting there will be not benefiting of that discussion. So basically, what you have to, whatever your Dr. Chief Gurupati has presented is excellent and evidence-based. And don't try to dilute that evidence by bringing your clinical points, especially Manisha. Please don't do that. And what you have to understand is that, whenever a mandible is not involved, there are 3 options: whether you can do a periosteal stripping, whether you are going to do marginal mandibulectomy, or you are doing a segmental or hemimandibulectomy. That is an issue. Each national board candidate has to be very, very clear-cut ideas about these things. And many times they fail in either in terms of assessing the extent of disease and deciding treatment, or they fail in deciding which kind of treatment is ideal for this particular kind of extent. So many times the people are so much pushing forward for the more conservatism. And as a DNB examiner, a person sitting will be looking into mainly one aspect: whether this particular candidate can practice a safe surgical oncology practice in terms of oncologically achieving good survival. And Manisha, I heard Manisha saying that overall survival is not important. I don't know where you got that idea. That overall survival is the only the best optimal outcome of cancer treatment. If you think about the outcome of cancer treatment, it's mainly three. You have to have overall survival up. You have to have good quality of life for the patient at affordable cost. These are the three important principles of cancer treatment. Anything less than that is not the optimal management. So you want to have the best overall survival and with good quality of life, whether you have disease or not. So in that perspective, deciding is very important. Whether, from the, as I gather from this discussion as well as many exams, is that if suppose the tumor is just abetting, touching periosteum or away from that, you are well away, well okay with stripping periosteum and doing surgery. The moment it touches the bit of periosteum and going eroding into cortex, you have to have a marginal mandibulectomy with a good margin. Whether a negative margin is acceptable or you have to put at 0.5 centimeter margin, I'm not sure. It's subject to that guidelines. And once it is involved in cortex, you have to have the segmental or hemimegalectomy. I think please take these principles in mind when you go for exams, because this is very crucial for the exam, because 30% fail is decided by the simple fact of mandibular involvement. Manoj, please correct me if I am wrong.
No, you are absolutely right. Because in DNB, as we have seen as examiners, majority of the people are not able to decide what is the ideal modality of treatment. And in case like you said that yes, mandibular management is important. And what is more important here is, like, suppose you decide to do a mandibular segmentectomy, then you have to also plan the reconstruction. So most of the people may do a segmentectomy but will not plan a reconstruction. So if you plan to do a segmentectomy, which may be acceptable, may not be acceptable to the examiner, you have to put your point that why are you planning to do a segment and not a margin. But if you plan to do a segment or a hemi, then you have to also come out with reconstructive options. Then you have to put it in your reconstruction letter that you have to do a bone reconstruction also. And then you have to come out with options of reconstructions, that how are you going to reconstruct if you do a segmental mandibulectomy. Because that is something which most of the people won't do. They will do a soft tissue cover, but they will not do a bone reconstruction. So if you are excising the bone, you have to reconstruct the bone. The mandible has to be stabilized. The occlusion has to be achieved, and patient should be able to chew at least from the opposite side if you are planning to do a segment. That is minimum that you have to do. That is minimum that you have to do. So if you are planning a segment, I always say that there are no right answers or there are no wrong answers. You have to justify your answer. If you can justify your answer, you are right. If you fail to justify your answer, you fail. So every answer that you give in the examination has to be rationalized. You have to put reasons that why are you doing it. So if you are doing a wide excision, you have to say why are you doing a wide excision. If you are doing a composite resection, you have to say why you are doing a composite resection. How are you going to handle the neck? How are you going to handle the mandible? How are you going to do the reconstruction? So head and neck is very easy. Like the clinical examination, people do miss the neck notes. That is one important thing. Staging could be wrong. That's the second thing. And planning the treatment is the most important aspect, which most of the people have a problem. So I have a question from Kush here, which says, what is the percentage of osteoradionecrosis post-marginal mandibulectomy? Osteoradionecrosis can occur even with the intact mandible. So the rate depends upon the radiation. And now with LINAC being in use, the chances of osteoradionecrosis post-radiation has reduced. Osteoradionecrosis occurs only after radiation, and this with LINAC is drastically reduced. Now it doesn't occur. Then for the disease which is involving the tongue, floor of mouth, or gingivolingual sulcus, what you do is you do a rim plus lingual cortical mandibulectomy. So it is actually not just the rim resection, it is also rim plus oblique resection. because the tumor is invading through the lingual cortex, and that lingual cortex has to be excised. So it is rim plus, not vertical exactly, but lingual corticectomy. So lingual cortex also has to go. It's a different kind of a marginal mandibulectomy. The involvement of mandible from the tongue side is actually very less, because if you look at the tongue lesions, they tend to invade towards the midline, cross the midline and invade the opposite side of the tongue, or they go into the floor of mouth. So it is very, very, very rare for even for a T4 tongue to actually invade the mandible. So invasion of the mandible is less common in tongue, and it is more common in buccal mucosa, especially if the tumor is lying in the gingivobuccal sulcus. Tumors which are abutting the gingivobuccal sulcus, buccal mucosa abutting gingivobuccal sulcus. That is where you are going to find maximum bone involvement, along with lower alveolar tumors, which invade from the alveolar bone to the cortical bone. So these are the two situations you find maximum involvement. From the lingual side, floor of mouth, yes, you do find, but then a lingual cortical excision itself or vertical marginal mandibulectomy is sufficient. You can do that. What is recurrence and what is second primary? Well, anything that occurs within the field of primary radiation, we assume that a surgery has been done and a radiation has been done. So anything that occurs within this field of the primary surgery or primary radiation is considered as a recurrence. And anything that occurs outside the field is taken as a second primary. This is the basic difference between a second primary and a recurrence, because all of them will be squamous cell carcinoma if they occur within the field, either the surgical field if radiation has not been given, or within the radiation field if radiation has been given, will be considered as recurrence. So primary field of radiation, field of neck radiation. So you have primary failures in the primary field, you have neck failures in the radiation field, and you have distant metastasis in the distance fields. It has nothing to do with the time of resection, and it is purely based on location of recurrence. So it can occur within a month, or it can occur after 2 years. So late recurrences also are known, though it is said that 50% of the recurrences occurs within the 2 years time, and rest of them occurs obviously after 2 years. So almost 50% of recurrences, if they have to occur, will occur within the first 2 years of time. Rashmi Shukla, IMRT ORN is less than 3%. Yes, Rashmi, thank you. That is what I'm saying, that now with newer techniques of radiation, the osteoradionecrosis rates have gone down drastically. And Rashmi has said that it is less than 3%. Anshika wants to add something.
Sir, I had a doubt in that question regarding recurrence and second primary.
Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to know if the disease has come within the radiation or the surgical field after 6 months of completion of all the therapies.
Yes,
Will it be called a second primary or recurrence?
No, it will be called as recurrence. It will still be called the recurrences, because recurrences 50%, as I said, 50% of the recurrences occurs within 2 years.
Yes, sir.
That means 50% of the recurrences can occur after 2 years also. So it will still be called as a recurrence. If it is within the field. If it is within the field, it is recurrence. It is never a second primary. Second primary always occurs at a new site. It never occurs on the same site.
Not really, because head and neck cancers have you have a concept of field cancerization. So what do you call a field?
The whole of
What
the
is
oral
the field
cavity.
in?
The whole of the
Exactly.
oral cavity.
So if a
esophagus,
patient comes back, and the whole of the oral cavity would also be included with the radiation field.
No, not
when you
now.
have
Not now,
post-op RT.
Manisha. Not now, Manisha.
Most of
With
it.
IMRT,
most of it.
IGRT, the new techniques
have-
which we use, it is only
Yes, with
it is only
IMRT,
the operating
IGRT,
field.
it will not.
It will not be included.
It is only the.
Yeah.
So what do you actually consider as field?
The
That
field
is the problem. You will have a patient who is having a reconstruction, a free flap, which
Yeah.
is like twice the size of the primary defect.
Hmm.
If you have a patient with a PMMC flap, it is also larger than the size of the primary defect most of the time.
Yes.
You have a 1 centimeter margin.
Yeah, Rashmi.
All the
We have
would
a large series of
yeah,
papers.
Rasmi.
Sir, I have written also.
Yeah.
I have written also that we have large series of papers for the definition of infield recurrence, marginal recurrence, and distant recurrence.
Yes.
Whatever the target we are giving, basically we are giving in the dose and isodose line, that whatever the dose, like 50% if we are giving, 90% dose if it is covering, but beyond the target, whatever the 90% dose is coming, so that is in field recurrence.
Yes.
Going beyond the 90 to 20%, it is marginal recurrences, and beyond that, we are saying a second primary. So there are
Yes.
large number of series defining this definition for the in-field local recurrence or marginal recurrence.
Yes, Rashmi. This definition is now utilized in almost all the cancers. Even in the breast cancer or any cases where radiation is being used either as a primary or as an adjuvant, the same definition is being used. And whatever happens within the radiation field is recurrence. Whatever happens at the margin, marginal recurrence, and anything that happens outside the radiation field is second primary. It's the same standard definition which is applies everywhere.
Yes, that is exactly what I wanted to say. Because if you have a field, you would qualify it as a marginal recurrence or a second primary. That border between what is a marginal recurrence and what is exactly second primary is a little gray. It will always remain a little gray. But obviously, if you have another subsite involvement, that would
Yes.
obviously be taken as a second primary. Another
Yes.
subsite means if you have a primary in the tongue and you have a recurrence in the palate or in the buccal mucosa,
Yes.
it will obviously be a second primary.
Yes. So do we have any other questions? This is an area where not much of research has been done, and not much of direct clinical trial evidence is present. Majority of the work is retrospective and has evolved over I think last 30 years, because before 1970 nobody used to conserve the mandible. So the first conservation happened in 1970, and it is something like last 50 years the slowly mandible conservation is evolving. So if there is any other question.
Can we comment one thing?
Yeah, Rashmi.
Hello.
Yeah, Rashmi.
Sir, what Dr. Manisha was asking, that it is whether if it is an overlap between the marginal and second primary. So normally we follow where the majority of the tumor epicenter is. If it is 55 to 65% of the volume is within the marginal side, we call it as marginal, or which is in beyond that, we call it the second primary. It's a rough estimate, difficult estimate.
Yeah, it's a very
Typically,
difficult.
then we decide about the epicenter.
Yes, yes. Thank you. If there are no other questions, I thank everybody for participation.